Alright, so welcome back. I hope you figured out how to get this working. First of all, I'm going to simply take the fooplot website and put them right next to each other, so I can easily see on the left and right what I want to be making. I see I need to start by inverting the time. So I can do that with float times float. And I set this to -1. So this will, the resulting will simply be the inverse of the time seconds, or the negative value of the time in seconds. Now the next step is to multiply this result. So float times float with 0.015. And the last step will be to add 5. And I'm going to return this right now. There is just one minor problem that was not included specifically in the challenge, but maybe you figured it out. If we go on far enough, the interval will become negative. And we don't want that to happen. We want to cut it off somewhere. And we can do this by getting a maximum float, and the maximum will be actually more like the minimum interval we want to have, and I want to make this 1/4 of a second. So with this all implemented, I can now hook it up to our spawn method, and I'm going to drag the function over here. And actually, I want to make this a pure function, so I don't have to put in the execution flow. And I realize now that I've used this pure function a couple of times without really explaining what it does and what it's for. And a pure function is basically a sort of a promise, and this promise is enforced that you do not alter the game state in any way. So in this case, we are not changing anything to the game. We are just simply calculating a value, so we can make this a pure function. Now when we come back here, you see we have lost the annoying execution line, and we can just hook this up over here. So we can delete the spawn interval and use the calculated value. Then we go back to here to the event graph and also do this for the initial spawn interval. Right, so well, I think everything is implemented. So I'm going to increase this, and just to be sure, I want to print the calculated value. So I'm putting a print over here, hooking it up like this. This is a conversion to a string that is automatically added. And I'm gonna press play, and in the top left corner we should begin seeing the calculated value. Let's see, it's decreasing. Well, that seems to be working properly. So I'm going to stop the simulation, and if we decide that it must be steeper, or the interval is too little, or too big, or where the minimum interval is different, it's easiest to create some variables so you don't have to look very far to change these values. So I'm going to drag off this float here, and I'm going to say promote to variable, and I'll call this variable spawn interval modifier, and this 5 is our initial spawn interval initial, and this one was our spawn interval minimum. So just going to sort this out, make it nice to read. So it's now also much more descriptive, our function, because we've added names to these numbers, and they're not just random numbers that happen to be in a blueprint node. So the initial spawn interval we created before can go, delete, and now when I want to change them, I can simply go over here, going to drag the details tab back to the right. If that is working, well, this is fine. So I want to start out at 2 seconds just for testing, and I want to increase the modifier to say 0. Let's say just remove the 0. So now we should see that it's decreasing really fast. I just need to wait a couple of seconds to verify whether our spawning minimum is okay. 0.25 is well, and it's really raining down ICBMs. There's no way you could ever save yourself with this many nukes coming in. At least so I think. So let's stop the simulation, go back to our ICBM spawn, set the modifier back to 0.015, initial spawn back to 5, and the minimum 0.25. That's fine for now. We just need to play test it really and see if those values are good. So I think that in the next video I will start adding some objects to the environment to make it all a little bit more pleasing to the eye, because it's even though we have a nice landscape, it's still pretty pretty boring environment, and adding some plants and rocks and stuff can really shape it up. So I'll see you in the next one.